Greetings, Hotep, peace, all that good stuff. I know it's been a couple weeks since the last video. We're gonna get into that in a minute. Been obviously some personal stuff going on in the last few weeks that I'm gonna get to in a minute. Real quick, couple quick announcements. Moving forward, we will not be having any event for this month and next month. We're actually in the process of getting a set location, and the upcoming rituals and work we're going to do is going to be more private and by invite only. It's not going to be open events like we've been doing. So next event by invite will more than likely be in the month of April. So there will not be nothing this month, not be nothing next month, as we now kind of close off and work with the core group that we have. So we're going to keep it a little bit more private because of where we're at and doing some of the ritualistic work. So more information to come on that. Again, if you are interested in getting a consultation, which again I like to address in the beginning of videos so I don't get emails on how does a consultation work. If you are interested in receiving a consultation, or some people are emailing me about getting card readings, tarot card readings. Yes, I do that too. If that is your interest and you would like a tarot card reading, I use the Tarot of the Dead. If that is an interest, if you are interested in a specific method, that can be arranged. Just need to specify that. A consultation in general, basically you pretty much dictate how the consultation goes. If you want to focus on specific areas, if you have specific questions, or you just want information on this path and what it's about, things of that nature, you pretty much dictate and control what goes on in the consultation. The consultation can be done in person. If you can't get to me in person, it can be done via social media, Skype, Google Hangouts, IMO, FaceTime app, etc. It lasts up until maximum 1 hour, and it costs $52 to do that consultation, and it can be paid for via PayPal or Square, which is a method of credit or debit over the phone prior to the reading. So again, if you're interested in that consultation, you can contact me at khnum19@gmail.com, and you can specify what type of consultation / reading you would like. If you would like, again, a tarot card reading, specify that. If you would like just an overall general consultation, specify that. Again, the email is khnum19@gmail.com. Please at least give me 24 to 48 hour notice prior to the consultation, because I go in order as I receive them, and it's hard for me to do same day. I know some people will email in the morning and see if they can set something up the same day. That's usually doesn't work out. So please allow 24 to 48 hours. There usually is sufficient enough time. All right, so having said that, got that out of the way. Been gone a couple weeks. I know it's been about 2 weeks. Didn't post a video last week. With some personal stuff going on, which is going to kind of lead me into the topic I want to talk about on this video. Those that did not know, except for those that are close to me and deal with me on a regular basis, my father was ill, and he was battling a rare form of cancer, and he passed away on January 29th, which was not too long ago, just less than 2 weeks ago. For those that do know the situation, I don't really talk about personal things openly, but I'm just going to briefly talk about this because it's going to tie into the subject that kind of motivated me to do this video. And I think it's something that needs to be discussed, especially considering the fact that we all go through this on a regular basis, and the fact that I just recently went through it. Just to give you a quick background on what happened, he was diagnosed with cancer back in September. After they diagnosed the tumor, they did surgery to remove it and told him that it could be removed. He could be treated. The tumor was removed. He recovered a couple of weeks from the surgery and then started 6 weeks of radiation, which pretty much tore him the fuck up as far as his appetite, and it just days immediately into it, just only a couple of days into it, he just was never the same. Lost his appetite, couldn't eat anything. He got through the 6 weeks of radiation treatment. He finished it, which was right before the Christmas holiday. Now, mind you, after he got his surgery, they did a PET scan. He was declared cancer-free. After he did his 6 weeks radiation, he got another PET scan, and he was declared cancer-free. Going into the first week in January, mind you, the radiation is done. He still wasn't eating. He was losing a lot of weight. He was getting dehydrated, malnutrition. So took him to the hospital on January 11th. Long story short, they hooked him up to IVs, pumped him with some nutrition. He looked great. He was talking great, sounded great. And they pretty much thought he might have had esophagitis, which the radiation can cause, and maybe was affecting the eating. Or his eating, and maybe they thought that's what was causing the problem. A couple days later, they ran some tests. Long story short, found more mass tumors spreading all to his organs. So the cancer had metastasized and gotten to his lymph nodes, and just in a matter of a couple of weeks' time, spread rapidly. And it was pretty much. Excuse me one second. Okay, sorry about that. And again, long story is short, again, as I was saying, the cancer pretty much in a matter of a 2-week period, mind you, tumors resurfaced and spread all through his body, and there was pretty much nothing they could do. Took him home on home hospice on the 13th, and he pretty much lasted about 15, 16 days. He made it to his 74th birthday, which was January 23rd, passed away 6 days later. Everybody came to see him, which I think was good in the sense that it kind of brought him to his own personal peace with things. And he transitioned on Monday, January 29th. So this all in a matter of 3 months period. How fast something can happen, and again, extremely fast. Which brings me to the topic, which obviously when you deal with something like this, it opens up your thoughts and your minds to a whole bunch of different things. This topic of death, and we've talked about this in previous videos and in classes. But there's something unique in the finality of it, and watching what the human soul deals with and kind of sorting out that process. This is obviously, and I'm sure there's many other people out here that can relate and have had similar experiences. This is obviously not this is not my first time dealing with the tragic loss of somebody, an immediate family member, a close loved one. Lost my my oldest son's first mother in 2011 to a chronic illness, and my mother back in 1996 to a chronic illness. So each experience is different, but what's unique is this finality of it. It made me think of a lot of different aspects of spirituality and consciousness. And you've heard me say in previous videos in the past Most people, one of the key components why they gravitate towards some type of spirituality or dogma or spiritual system is due to the fact of the mysteries and the unknown and the finality of death and what is it. That's just a reality. I don't give a shit what it is you study. I don't care what it is you claim to know. I don't care how much knowledge you think you have. And I said it in the past and I'm going to say it again. Nobody really knows what happens to them at the time of death. Where do we really actually go? Again, you can read the Coming Forth by Day in the ancient Egyptian culture. You can read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, etc. These were just concepts that these cultures passed down of how they try to conceptualize what it is we call death or eternal life. I think one has to understand on the left-hand path. When you understand, and what's helped me deal with it over the years in dealing with loss of loved ones is having the knowledge of what death really is important. One thing we can't do, as you see in many cultures, and especially when you look in, Christianity for an example, there's this long drawn-out mourning process. And I'm not saying that one should not exercise their emotion or grieving. Of course, that's a human aspect, human nature. But it should not be a long, drawn-out mourning, sad process. Because the bottom line is, are we really mourning for them, or are we really mourning for ourselves and our selfishness? And what I mean by that is when I looked at, for an example, my father, even though it was a very short period of time and he didn't suffer. My mother was a different story. We're talking a 10-year period. So that process is a little bit different. But is it based on selfish reasons why an individual mourns? Most people are mourning and saddening for themselves because it's that finality of not being able to talk to that person, not being able to see that person. So that's kind of where the long, drawn-out process deals with. But as we know on this path, when understanding the mysteries of what we call life and death, and as I said before, we have it kind of twisted and we have it kind of backwards. What we know as the realm of the living, what we think is living, this physical existence of getting up every day. As we get older physically, more ailments come. Depending on your age, I'm not talking about some of you young folks that are still in your teens and all that, but we know as you get older, the body doesn't respond as quick. You feel more aches, you feel more pains. You're getting closer to what we call physical death. So, as I've said before in the past, what we're calling life and death is kind of backwards. We got it twisted. But this unknown mystery of death, the finality of it, the grieving process, the mourning, we've also kind of got that twisted. We think sometimes we're mourning for the individual that's passed, and we are to an extent, but we're feeling sorry and sad for ourselves because of, again, the ability not to hear that person's voice again, not to be able to talk to that person, and sometimes we want to keep them here for our personal selfish reasons. And in my opinion, and I think most people would agree with this, when somebody's chronically ill, sometimes the quality of life, that's not a way to live, to keep somebody here for your own personal selfish reasons, if you understand death and what waits after that. You hear people say these cliches, which kind of gets under my skin a little bit. They're in a better place. Religious people say they're in heaven, isn't it? But let's be factual. Do they really know that? Is that really the case? Or is that a belief system that you've instilled in your subconscious mind to make you feel comfortable? And if that's the case, that's fine. If that's what you believe. Now, what I believe, and again, this is why I wanted to do this video, how does somebody on the left-hand path approach or look at what is death, and what happens after death and where that person goes. How does a left-hand path person put that into perspective? Again, I can only explain that in my experience and my study. We know the soul. We know we are beings of energy. Energy, as we know, taught in this process in quantum and metaphysics, cannot be destroyed. We know the soul is eternal, and that energy constantly or never ceases and lives on. Now, when dealing with reincarnations and reincarnating in another life form, that's a whole nother story, and I know a whole nother video for a whole nother topic. But we know in this path that it's not the end. It's not, and a left-hand path person doesn't look at that, now this person is just sitting up in a place called heaven, not doing anything. This person has now become a fabric of that consciousness of all. They are now energy. You now have the ability to make contact with that person, especially if it's a bloodline relative, when working with ancestral spiritual systems. Which, when you understand that and have experienced and worked with it, you now understand the real significance, meaning when somebody makes the statement, well, they're in a better place now. So when I hear that, I don't look at it like a religious person would say this person's in this non-reality place called heaven. I look at it, this person's now has merged back into the essence of, if you want to call it, all or everything, and they are now the very fabric and energy of that consciousness that you now have access to, which is a whole different approach. Now, when I myself performed the ritual and ceremony to send my father off, whose wishes were to be cremated, which he was, and myself, and shout out to Brother Jack, big thanks to Brother Jack who assisted me in the ritual at the chapel, and all his family and friends turned out. We did a vampiric ritual out of the vampire ritual book, the Rite of the Dead, sending the soul off into its journey and destination, which is a powerful ritual and ceremony because of the significance and substance of what it stands for, all the things we're pretty much talking about now. And I think it's important, when you understand what death really represents, to send that soul off in its correct form, in its correct methodology. Removing the spookism, when you understand the ritual and read it, it kind of speaks for itself. It kind of makes clear all of the fallacies and misconceptions of what death is, and it connects that individual to those that are still here, and to those that have also passed on that they're connected to. So it has that ancestral linkage, which I think is very important. So I think it's important, regardless of your belief, if you're a Christian and you believe in that faith belief system and that's how you want to send your deceased off, so be it. But if you're on this path, I think it's very important. And I've seen people over the years who claim to be in conscious circles and claim to have spirituality and consciousness, and then I see them do some faith-based Christian rite to send a loved one off, which doesn't make any sense to me. And not to criticize or judge, but it kind of shows that they're not really on this path or studying this path. So that's why I thought it was very important to send my father off the correct way and do it myself, which was very, very important to me, and kind of brought that resolution and finality, to the whole process. Now, in dealing with it, for all those listening, and I'm sure there's many that have dealt with this many times before in the past, and this is something that happens frequently, and I'm sure if it's not us, we know someone that has dealt with the loss or tragedy of an immediate family member, a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, a husband, wife, a daughter, son, etc. That's a different aspect of dealing with a loss and death than, say, a distant cousin or a friend that you knew here and there. It's not the same energy or emotion. So let's keep it real 100%. The bottom line is this, okay? And you have to understand this. Now we're going to kind of get into some of the cold hard truths of this scenario, and this is the reality, and this may not come off pleasant. Bottom line, at the end of the day, outside of you and immediate family and friends, nobody really gives a shit. Let's keep it 100%, okay? And I say nobody really gives a shit in the sense, let me give you an example. You know, when somebody finds out, and through this whole process, I'm talking about maybe people through work or people here and there that heard, heard your father passed away, or some comment to that, my condolences. That's the generic response. That's what people are programmed to say. But really, in essence, and again, not saying that this is intentional, but really, in essence, doesn't really have a bearing or effect on them. And that's why I say nobody really gives a shit outside of those immediate people that I aforementioned. The reality is, in dealing with it, because these are some of the questions I've gotten, and I'm going to reflect back on past conversations and questions I've gotten in relation to this topic. Everybody deals with the loss of a loved one or death differently, and I get that everybody's different. I can only relate how I've dealt with it in the past and presently in this current situation that just recently happened. You can't feel sorry for yourself. You have to, you do your mourning and your grieving process. You definitely need to exercise that emotion. That's human nature. You wouldn't be human if you didn't. It's not about being tough guy or tough girl and not showing some emotion, which I don't think is healthy. There are some people that internalize things, and I think that builds up more stress and trauma, and that's not good either. And that can have a lasting effect on you that lingers on for a long period of time. But you can't feel sorry for yourself. I've also watched people sink into depression because they cannot stay grounded in reality and deal with it. So an important aspect is, unfortunately, life goes on. Bills still have to be paid. The world doesn't give a fuck. Life continues, and I don't mean to sound callous and cold-hearted, but nothing stops because you have a personal situation, and I'm not trying to be insensitive to that. Let's talk reality, and I'm talking reality because if you're on this path, you need to be conscious and aware of this when dealing with death, because when you start feeling sorry for yourself and you expect others to feel sorry for you, that's going to pose a huge problem for you down the road. So life continues, life goes on, and I, again, in my experience with it, the best way to deal with it and move forward is to stay in a regular routine. I've told this to many people before. After your mourning and grieving process, get back into the regular routine and the things you do. Stay active, because that will kind of alleviate you sinking into that period where you feel sorry for yourself and get depressed, etc. Now, I know it might take others longer to get back to that point. I'm not one that personally believes in taking weeks and months and sitting around and figuring it out. Like I said, this process we did, I don't believe in a long, drawn-out burial process, which that's a lot of old school traditions with, laying the body out for viewing for a couple of days burial, which can be a 2-3 week process. That's not really something on this path that we really should promote and accept, because that makes it more gloom and doom in the sense of making it harder and more complicated for the individuals. But again, to each his own. If that's your choice, that's your choice. But I bring all this up to say, make sure you're not doing it for personal, selfish reasons, because if you really love that individual, whoever that individual may be, you shouldn't want to keep that person here for your own personal, selfish reasons, especially if their quality of life has been reduced to just misery and suffering. So we can't get it twisted. This is not the realm of the living, right? That's another trick that's been imposed upon us in spiritual dogmas and doctrines for centuries, all of them. They say that this is living. We're not living. We're living every day to die. This abode of the dead is really the doorway, as I've said before in past videos, the doorway to eternal life. Now again, I'm not saying that and encouraging anybody to speed up their physical death process. Let that happen in due time. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you should use your time here in mastering yourself. As we've said before, this is a path of self-mastery. So your abode here on this your time here on this physical realm should be spent mastering yourself, preparing yourself, making yourself aware of the knowledge and the wisdom you need. So when you do approach that time for your physical transition to quote unquote the afterlife or eternal life, you're prepared and ready to accept it. You understand? Not in a forced way in Christian dogmas where you're judged with all these rules and regulations and judgments, where fear is used as the motivating factor to try to get you in line with their personal ideology that men created. That's not what I'm talking about. When you factually educate yourself on the knowledge of life and death, you are now prepared to get to that point. So one of the objectives on this path, or one of your motivating factors to becoming a left-hand path practitioner or practicing the spiritual system, that should be one of them. Understanding and coming to grips with the mysteries of death and what it is and what it represents. And that's why necromancy, which we've touched on some videos, working with the spirits of the dead, the realm of the dead, archetypes and deities of the dead, is that bridge and gap between this so-called physical existence and spiritual existence. That's why it is an important spiritual system. And as we said in a few video we did a couple weeks back, you cannot negate the importance of the element of ancestral worship called necromancy and some other spiritual systems. It's an important base foundation, and the best way I can describe it, as I've said before in the past, it's like building a house. You need the foundation. Without the foundation, the house cannot stand. Eventually, in time, the house will fall apart. Well, in my own personal experience, and there might be others that have a difference of opinion on it, I don't really think you can practice left-hand path philosophy in its most beneficial aspect by eliminating the ancestral aspect of it. It's just my own personal experience. Now, again, there might be others out there that have, and maybe they don't incorporate any element of it. Power to you, but maybe you can even get greater and stronger results if you do. So when you understand ancestral worship too, it also helps you understand this so-called concept of what we call death, and especially dealing with it in relation to a loved one. Now let's be factual. The last thing I want to finish with, because I'm not going to keep this video too long. The last thing I want to finish with, understand there's different levels of that pain you deal with. Again, as I said earlier, dealing with the loss of a father, a mother, is a different type of experience. Dealing with it's not the same as maybe dealing with the loss of a brother or sister, and forbid the loss of a child, which hopefully in my lifetime I would never have to deal with that, because I've witnessed that with many people I know, and that is a whole different type of emotion and pain that one has to go through. That is not easy to deal with, and I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. And it takes a strong individual to get through that. There's different elements of the pain and the suffering that one experiences and deal with. But know this, and for those that recently participated in the work we did on the 9 angles, which was a ritual we did a couple of weeks ago, and again, I reflect back, and I know this is not a coincidence. It was actually the last ritual I performed before my father passed away on the 29th. We did this ritual 2 days before he passed away. And the 6th angle, for those that understand what the 9 angles are on the left-hand path, deals with stagnation, ice, frozen. It deals with points in your life, the sixth angle, where you get to that state of being stuck or stagnated, stasis, death. Not just physical death, mental death, emotional death. It's the point in the 9 angles where you're either going to get stuck, like Chuck, as we say, and go backwards, or you're going to overcome the obstacles, the blockages, the difficulties, be they mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual, and you're going to proceed forward. It's a time of test and challenge, and it's a time of dealing with your tribulations and being able to overcome them. Working through the concept of the 9 angles is a very important spiritual system on this path, or understanding them and correlating them to your spiritual evolution. I found it wasn't a coincidence, and obviously the ritual was planned almost 2 months in advance. That working was done prior to my father's passing, and I had to kind of reflect on that sixth angle. When you deal with the loss of a loved one, you're dealing with stasis and stagnation and death and being kind of frozen, stuck, because the element that ties into that sixth angle is ice, being frozen, stuck. But also understand, when ice reaches a certain temperature, it evaporates, it changes, it transitions into water. Water represents fluidity, and with fluidity comes change. So you can take that stasis, that sleep, that death, and transform it into evolution and growth. So are you going to stay stagnated and stuck, or are you going to transition and transform? So you can correlate that concept to a bunch of the different things. Personally, I was able to also correlate it to the passing of my father and him dealing with his terminal illness and his transition. It's a very powerful tool. And one thing we also have to take into important consideration, and I've seen so many people, regardless of what your spirituality is, what you practice or what you claim you deal with on a conscious and spiritual level, that's the time, and more than any other time, you need to draw upon your spirituality and your consciousness. I've seen people abandon it. I've seen people not rely and depend on it to give them the strength to get through with what they deal with. You'll see a lot of religious people do, in my opinion, in a false way, but these false concepts of life and death, heaven and hell. But I must give some of these people credit. They will draw upon the strength of their quote-unquote faith, whereas I've seen conscious people who claim to be conscious and spiritual, I've seen them just get torn down, broken apart, and it just shows you the real strength that they have and what they stand on, which is unfortunately not strong at all. So it's also very important, as I said before, when you're on this path, part of the process why you should come into this spiritual practice is to prepare yourself to understand these mysteries. This is one of the reasons why somebody becomes anything, whether it's a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew, a Buddha, anything. You're trying to understand that mystery of what happens to you after you die. If you really study this path, you know and accept what that is and what it represents, and how an individual deals with it. So these things are very critical. These things are something important to consider. So I thought it was important to do a video at this particular time. That was a little bit different from what I might normally do. But I just thought now was the right time to talk about this. More so, obviously, based on what I just recently went through and haven't gone through in the past. And I'm sure there's people watching this video now that have recently gone through it or have in the past, or might be going through it right now. And hopefully this video will help you understand that and how to deal with it. But also understand everybody deals with it differently. And I also had to understand and accept, for an example, in dealing with my sisters and other family members who some handled it well and better than others, you also have to take into consideration everybody deals with it differently. And that's important to understand in dealing with others and talking with others. Because you can't expect everybody to put it into perspective the way you might or the way you do. So I think this is an important topic because And again, not just because I recently went through it, I'm just saying in general, obviously, the time now to talk about it because of what I recently went through, but not just saying it because I recently went through it. I just think it's a topic that's not really addressed because it's not about playing tough guy or tough girl. Because sometimes everybody has these false illusions that it's soft to show emotion, or it's you know, you're weak if you do, etc. And that's not true. It's human nature. But when you're controlled by your emotions, then it applies you are weak and you can be controlled and things of that nature. So let's not get the two twisted. It's the same concept when people say money is the root of all evil. That's a bunch of bullshit, because without money you can't do anything. When you're controlled by money, it's the root of all evil. But you need money to be successful. I'm using the same metaphor. So when people say dumb shit like that, know how to put it into perspective. So just some of the things I wanted to touch on. And I know I've gotten some emails. Unfortunately, if a video doesn't go up right away, I know some people will send me an email, hey, what's going on, this and that. So that's what's going on. That's why you haven't heard nothing in a little bit over 2 weeks or however long it's been. That's what I've been preoccupied with. And again, those that know me, I'm not really one to get in depth about personal problems. Not that I internalize it. I do reach out when it comes time to reach out and you need that support and help, and I did that, and I do appreciate, again, those that came forward. You know who you are. I don't have to get into a whole list of names. Those that assisted with the ritual and ceremony of sending my father off, I appreciate that. So you do have to have the ability or know the ability when it is time to reach out for help. But I do believe you should not publicize your business. I'm switching to something else real quick. I'm not talking about this situation of dealing with personal loss of a loved one. You do have some people that just can't keep their fucking mouth shut, and all they do is tell their business to other people, or they gossip like little bitches. And I don't think that's something you should do. You should keep your own personal business and your own family business, especially. It should stay personal. You shouldn't be running your mouth. Men shouldn't be gossiping like bitches. And I say that in a sense, I don't want females to get offended, but you know how you females do. You like to cackle. When men don't get along, we just stay away from each other. Females, they can not stand the sight of each other and they still hang out with each other every day. That's another enigma for a whole nother class. But I do believe you're a weak person if you run your mouth all the time, and if you're telling everybody your business. That can be utilized against you. So sometimes, as I said in the past, you could sit back and keep quiet and let a fool talk and run their mouth. You can learn a lot from a fool. Just sit there and listen. And as you're listening, you'll be able to decipher the weakness of that individual. Just listen to all the nonsense they're spitting, and it'll just manifest for you right there in front of your face. There's that old saying, you can learn from a fool, and I've learned from many fools in the past, and will continue to. When I see somebody's got diarrhea of the mouth, I just keep quiet, because now I can just sit there and now strategize and get that individual's every aspect and weakness. Again, that's a whole nother class. But anyway, I wanted to talk about this topic. Just something, again, that I felt like I needed to express. Part also of the healing process, and it's good therapy to get it out. So I thought this was the right time to do this video. So I hope this video, again, will help anybody that's gone through it in the past or recently or going through it right now. Hopefully this is something that'll be beneficial and something that you can utilize this knowledge and information in dealing with the process. All right. So having said that, I'm going to pretty much stop it and wrap it up right there. Again, if you are interested, real quick, as I said, no event for the month of February and March. We will be doing something in April. We are in the process, as I said, looking for our own spot or facility where we are going to set up a left-hand path temple setting where we can work our own rituals on our time and how we want to work them instead of using another facility at restricted periods and times. But when we get that space, it's going to be only restricted to invite only. That's kind of, if you go back to something we talked about a year and some change ago, was getting a temple and starting to do work as far as the order we talked about forming. So it's going to be a little bit more sectioned off and private and by invite only because of where we're getting ready to go with it, and it's not productive just for anybody. Now the next question is, when it gets to that point, if interested, you contact us and we go from there. But it will be by invite only moving forward as we go down the road. That's pretty much where we're at in that. So I want to be clear on that. And again, if you are interested in the consultation that I mentioned in the beginning of the video, be it if you tarot card reading or consultation in general, whatever format you're interested in, again, you can contact me at khnum19@gmail.com. That's khnum19@gmail.com. All right, we'll see everybody on the next video. Peace.